Um, when they were raising children, by the time a boy was 3 years old, that was about the time when they would taste wine for the first time. So that's very different from the very disciplined Sparta. At about age 7, they would have a personal slave to teach them. The girls were usually taught by the mother, and they were taught dance and music. Um, as for their marriage, by the time a man was in their late 20s, they would usually marry a woman who was about 15 or so. Um, um, so that is a little different from the Sparta, a lot more regimented, a lot more efficient. And like how Spartans had a lot of exercising, and that was kind of their like main export, you could say. The Athenians were very big in the theater and the arts, so kind of they were very big theater people, and that was their entertainment as well. Um, uh, Sorry, I'm going back to marriage. So when someone was to get married, the father, um, the father of the bride would make a sacrifice. The girl would cut their hair, and they would be bathed, which would be kind of like a baptism. Um, at the marriage, people would throw nuts and fruit, which would be interesting. And the father was expected to have a dowry for her wife. Um, so this was kind of like an insurance policy, essentially, for the wife, so that if anything happened to the relationship, she'd still have that. And since these dowries were often very expensive, many times fathers, if they had a daughter, were kind of pressured to kill the child before it could come of age. The Athenians, who, as I said before, were very talkative and they loved to think, were also very big into theology. A man named Heraclitus once said, quote, "No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it is not the same river and he's not the same man," end quote. So that's just interesting. This might be the way they kind of thought and talked to each other. Now on to quote point 3. Sorry. And this is their impact on the modern world. One of the main things that impacts us today is the democracy of Athens. That's something that our system is very strongly founded on. Our system also gets some ideas from kind of the Republic of Athens. Samuel Adams once said he wanted America to be, quote, a Christian Sparta, end quote. The Republic of Sparta. He liked how the education system started very young and how that worked. James Madison once wrote in one of the federal papers that it was an exemplary republic. This isn't a quote, this is paraphrasing. An exemplary republic with a good senate, and he loved its longevity and stability. So many of our founding fathers got their ideas from places like Athens and Sparta. Also, many of our government buildings are modeled after their architecture. For example, the Supreme Court building, the state capitol, and the White House to some degree, because you have the pillars and things. That was very Greek architecture. We also get the feminist movement has a lot of connection to Sparta because of Spartans really being very efficient and having men do many of the jobs that, or women do many of the jobs that men would traditionally do, with men being more involved in the military. And so that kind of helped to boost the feminist movement in many ways and was a good reference for them. They also gave us the Olympics, which is, obviously something we celebrate every 4 years. And shoot, yeah. So it greatly affected our government, as Paul Meany said, quote, "The Spartan system appealed to the founders because of its focus on balancing power," end quote. It also greatly affects our culture, with things like feminism and how we see the gender roles, with things like the Olympics and sports. It also affects schooling in many places. So a very big impact it had was the British Empire. So the British Empire had public schools um, where they would send their boys away at about 6 years old, or could be as late as the late teens, and they would send to a boarding school. I'm sorry, they would send them for 6 to the late teens to a boarding school, where they would rarely return to visit family, and it was notoriously challenging. So this kind of copies the Spartan system and its goals to create kind of a generation of strong young men who are ready to take on suffering. So although we tend to think of ancient Greece as a unified culture, Athens and Sparta are dramatically different cultures, both of which had major impacts on the development of the Western world. Sparta was a highly organized society devoted to equality. Athens was an innovative society which developed many tools we use today, and together Athens and Sparta provided a foundation for the Western world. Okay, I'm all done. Sorry, that was a rough one. I'm going to have to send it in 2 parts. I was having trouble filming it. It's pretty long, and I meant to send this to you way earlier, so if you can't get to it, that's fine. Thanks.